The medical frigate Starling floated quietly near Waypoint 17, a busy trading station at the edge of known space. The station was a meeting point for dozens of alien species who came to trade, rest, and exchange information. Humans were still relatively new to this part of the galaxy, but they had earned a small reputation for their medical skills and their strange willingness to help anyone who needed it. Danny Cole sat in the medical bay, finishing his reports from the day. He was a tall man in his early 30s, with tired eyes and steady hands. As the chief medic aboard the Starling, he had seen many strange injuries and illnesses since leaving Earth. He had treated burned pilots, poisoned traders, and even a Corvalli warrior who had accidentally stabbed himself with his own ceremonial blade. Danny never judged, he just helped. The night was supposed to be quiet. Most of the crew had gone to sleep, and only the soft hum of the ship's systems kept Danny company. He was about to close his terminal when the communication panel beeped. "Medical Bay, this is station security," a rough voice said. "We have a situation near docking ring 4, abandoned cargo container. Something alive inside. Might need your expertise." Danny frowned. Abandoned cargo was common at Waypoint 17. Smugglers often dumped illegal goods when they feared inspection. But something alive was different. "I'm on my way," Danny said. He grabbed his medical kit and walked quickly through the corridors of the Starling. At the airlock, he found Captain Lisa Brennan waiting for him. She was a serious woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had commanded the Starling for 8 years and trusted Danny completely. "Security says it's a biological," she said, as they walked together toward the docking ring. "Could be dangerous. Could also be hurt," Danny replied. Lisa gave him a knowing look. She had seen Danny rush toward danger many times before when there was a patient involved. It was both his greatest strength and his most frustrating quality. The cargo container was a standard Corvalli transport box, about 3 meters long and 2 meters wide. A small crowd of station workers and security officers stood around it, keeping their distance. The smell hit Danny before he could see inside the thick, sour odor of infection and decay. "We scanned it," one of the security officers said. "Large life form. Feline classification. Vital signs are weak." Danny approached the container and looked through the small viewing window. His breath caught in his throat. Inside lay a creature unlike anything he had seen before. It was the size of a large lion, with sleek black fur that had lost its shine. 4 eyes, too large and too small, were closed in what looked like exhausted sleep. Its powerful body was covered in open sores that oozed dark fluid, and its ribs showed clearly through its skin. The creature's breathing was shallow and uneven. "That's a Vethrak," Lisa said softly from behind him. "Sacred war beasts of the Corvalli. They bond them to their warriors. I've never seen one up close." Danny had heard stories about Vethraks. They were said to be fierce, loyal, and nearly impossible to kill in battle. The Corvalli treated them as living weapons, symbols of honor and strength. To see one abandoned like garbage made something twist painfully in Danny's chest. "There's a data chip attached to the container," a security officer said, handing it to Lisa. She inserted it into her portable reader. Her expression darkened as she read the message. It says, "Infected with Shalkai rot. Beyond salvation. Do not touch." The security officers stepped back immediately. Even Danny recognized the term. Shalkai rot was a parasitic infection that the Corvalli considered a death sentence. The parasites buried themselves into the nervous system and slowly killed the host from the inside. No treatment existed. Those infected were given mercy killings to end their suffering. "We should seal this container and notify the Corvalli authorities," the lead security officer said. "Let them handle their own problem." "Handle it how?" Danny asked. "By killing it faster? It's already dying," the officer replied. "There's nothing anyone can do." Danny looked through the window again. The creature, the Vethrak, shifted slightly in its sleep. A low sound escaped its throat. Something between a growl and a whimper. It was the sound of an animal in terrible pain, an animal that had been abandoned by everyone who should have protected it. "I want to take it aboard the Starling," Danny said. Lisa stared at him. "Danny, You heard what the message said. Shalkai rot is incurable. The Corvalli have been dealing with it for thousands of years. If they can't fix it, what makes you think you can? I don't know if I can, Danny admitted, but I know I have to try. Look at it, Lisa. Someone threw this creature away like it was nothing. They didn't even have the courage to stay with it while it died. They just left it here, alone, in pain. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the suffering Vethrak, then back at Danny. She had known him for 5 years. She knew that once he decided to help someone, nothing in the galaxy could stop him. If you bring that thing aboard, you're responsible for containment, she said finally. Full quarantine protocols. I won't risk the crew. Understood, Danny said. And Danny, Lisa added, if there's truly nothing you can do, you need to be ready to let it go. Keeping it alive just to suffer isn't kindness. It's cruelty. Danny nodded slowly. He understood what she meant. But as he watched the medical team carefully transfer the unconscious Vethrak onto a hover stretcher, he made a silent promise to himself and to the creature before him. He would not give up easily. He would fight for this abandoned beast the way no one else had. He would search for answers that the Corvalli never bothered to find. And if he failed, if there was truly no hope, then at least this creature would not die alone in a cold metal box. At least it would know that someone had cared enough to try. As they carried the Vethrak through the airlock and into the medical bay of the Starling, Danny placed his hand gently on the creature's matted fur. It was burning with fever. Beneath his fingers, he could feel the faint rhythm of a heart that refused to stop beating. Hold on, Danny whispered. Just hold on a little longer. I've got you now. The Vethrak's 4 eyes remained closed, but somewhere deep in its fevered dreams, perhaps it heard him. Perhaps it understood that for the first time in a very long while, it was no longer alone. And that was where everything truly began. The quarantine room aboard the Starling was not designed for a patient the size of a Vethrak. Danny and his team had to push equipment aside and lay extra padding on the floor to create a space large enough for the creature to rest. The Vethrak lay motionless on the makeshift bed, its black fur dull and patchy, its breathing still dangerously shallow. Katie Marsh, the ship's head nurse, stood beside Danny as they reviewed the first round of scans. She was a kind woman in her late 20s with gentle hands and a soft voice that seemed to calm even the most frightened patients. She had been the first to volunteer when Danny asked for help with this case. I've never seen anything like this, she said quietly, studying the holographic display. The parasites are everywhere. Brain tissue, spinal cord, major nerve clusters. There must be thousands of them. Greg Santos, the ship's xenobiologist, nodded grimly from his station. He was a stocky man, with thick glasses, and a habit of muttering to himself when he was thinking hard. The Corvalli files call them Shalkai worms. They enter through open wounds or contaminated food. Once inside, they migrate to the nervous system and begin feeding. The host feels increasing pain until the organs start shutting down. Death usually takes 3 to 4 weeks. How long has this one been infected? Danny asked. Greg checked his readings. Based on the parasite distribution, I'd estimate at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. It's remarkable that it's still alive. Danny moved closer to the Vethrak and knelt beside its massive head. Up close, he could see the creature's face more clearly. The strong jaw, the sharp teeth visible through slightly parted lips, the closed eyes that twitched occasionally with pain. Despite its fearsome appearance, there was something deeply sad about it, something broken. What do the Corvalli medical files say about treatment? Danny asked. Nothing useful, Greg replied. They've tried everything over the centuries. Surgery, chemical treatments, radiation. The parasites adapt to everything. The Corvalli stopped trying to cure Shalkai rot generations ago. Now they just end the suffering as quickly as possible. Katie shook her head. That's horrible. This creature is still fighting. You can see it. It hasn't given up. Neither will we, Danny said firmly. He spent the next several hours studying the Shalkai parasites in detail. He examined tissue samples, analyzed their biological structure, and compared their chemistry to similar parasites from human medical history. The Corvalli had approached the problem from their own perspective, using treatments that made sense for their biology. But Danny was looking at it with human eyes, and human medicine had faced parasitic infections for thousands of years. Late in the night, Danny noticed something strange. The Shalkai worms had a peculiar sensitivity in their cellular structure. When exposed to certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, their cells showed signs of stress. The effect was small, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. The Corvalli never tested this range of frequencies, Danny murmured, checking the alien medical records. Their equipment doesn't even operate in this spectrum. They never saw this weakness. He shared his discovery with Greg, who ran additional tests to confirm. The xenobiologist's eyes widened behind his glasses. You might be onto something, Danny. If we can calibrate our equipment to target these frequencies precisely, we might be able to damage the parasites without harming the host. It's a start, Danny said. But we need more. The radiation alone won't kill all of them. We need something to weaken them first. Make them vulnerable. He turned to his stock of human antiparasitic medications. These drugs had been developed over centuries to fight infections on Earth. They were designed for human biology, but with careful modification, they might work on alien parasites as well. It would take time to adapt them, and there was no guarantee of success. But it was their best chance. The next morning, word began to spread through Waypoint 17 that the humans had taken in a Shalkai-infected Vethrak. Most of the alien traders thought the humans were foolish. Some thought they were insane. A few, however, watched with quiet curiosity, wondering if perhaps these newcomers from Earth knew something the rest of the galaxy had missed. The Corvalli response came that afternoon. High Custodian Vorath arrived at the Starling's airlock with 4 armed guards. He was tall even for a Corvalli, with pale gray skin and cold blue eyes that showed no warmth. His ceremonial robes marked him as a religious leader, one of the keepers of Corvalli tradition and law. I am here for the Vethrak, Vorath announced when Captain Brennan met him at the airlock. The Vethrak is currently under the care of our medical team, Lisa replied calmly. It's not going anywhere. Vorath's expression did not change. The creature is contaminated beyond recovery. It belongs to the Corvalli people. We will take it and perform the merciful rites. Merciful rites? Lisa repeated. You mean killing it, ending its suffering, Vorath corrected. This is our sacred duty. The beast is in pain. Every moment it lives is cruelty. Danny stepped forward from behind Lisa. He had been watching the exchange quietly, but now he spoke. The creature is stable for now. We're developing a treatment that may help. Vorath looked at Danny as if he were examining an insect. A treatment? There is no treatment for Shalkai rot. This has been known for 3,000 years. Your arrogance is remarkable. Maybe we're looking at the problem differently, Danny said. Your medicine is advanced, but you stopped trying to find a cure centuries ago. We're still looking, because there is nothing to find, Vorath replied coldly. You are wasting time and prolonging the creature's agony for your own pride. This is not compassion. It is selfishness. The word stung, but Danny held his ground. Then, let us be selfish a little longer. If we fail, you can perform your rites. But until then, the Vethrak stays with us. Vorath was silent for a long moment. His eyes moved from Danny to Lisa to the corridor that led toward the medical bay. Finally, he spoke again. Very well. You have 1 week. If the creature still lives and still suffers after 7 days, I will return with the authority to take it by force if necessary. This is not a negotiation. It is a warning. Ander. He turned and walked away without waiting for a response. His guards followed in perfect silence. After the Corvalli left, Lisa let out a breath she had been holding. 1 week, Danny. That's not much time. It's enough, Danny said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. He returned to the quarantine room where Katie was sitting beside the Vethrak. She had been talking to it softly, telling it stories about Earth, about green forests, and blue oceans, and warm sunlight. The creature's eyes were still closed, but its breathing seemed slightly calmer than before. "Can it understand you?" Danny asked. Katie smiled sadly. "I don't know, but I think it knows it's not alone anymore. That has to count for something." Danny looked at the Vethrak, at this magnificent, suffering beast that the galaxy had given up on. He thought about Vorath's words, about the 3,000 years of failure. Then he thought about human history, about all the diseases that had once been death sentences until someone refused to accept that answer. "We have 1 week," he said. "Let's get to work." The creature stirred slightly, and one of its 4 eyes opened just a crack. For a brief moment, it looked directly at Danny. The eye was amber-colored and filled with pain, but somewhere deep within it, Danny saw something else: hope. He would not let it die. The treatment began on the 3rd day. Danny had spent 2 sleepless nights preparing. He modified human antiparasitic drugs to work with the Vethrak's alien biology. Greg calibrated the radiation equipment to target the precise frequencies that would harm the Shalkai parasites. Katie prepared emergency supplies in case the creature's condition became critical. Everything was ready. Everything except certainty. The Vethrak, whom Katie had started calling Shadow because of his dark fur, lay on the medical bed, barely conscious. His amber eyes opened occasionally, tracking the movement of the humans around him. He seemed to understand that something important was about to happen. "His vital signs are as stable as they're going to get," Katie reported. "Heart rate is elevated, but that's expected given the infection level." Danny nodded and prepared the first injection. The modified antiparasitic compound was a pale blue liquid that glowed faintly in the dim light of the quarantine room. It represented humanity's best guess at fighting an alien infection that had defeated every treatment for 3,000 years. "Starting first administration now," Danny said into the medical recorder. 50 milliliters of modified compound, delivered intravenously. He inserted the needle carefully into one of the large veins in Shadow's foreleg. The creature stirred, but did not resist. Perhaps he was too weak, perhaps he somehow sensed that these humans were trying to help him. The effect was immediate. Shadow's body tensed as the medication entered his bloodstream. His 4 eyes snapped open, and a sound emerged from his throat. Not quite a roar, not quite a scream, but something terrible that contained elements of both. His massive paws scraped against the floor as his muscles contracted involuntarily. "The parasites are reacting," Greg said urgently, watching the monitors. "They're releasing toxins. His blood pressure is spiking." Katie grabbed emergency medication while Danny worked to stabilize their patient. Shadow thrashed on the bed, his amber eyes rolling wildly. The pain must have been incredible. The parasites that had been slowly killing him were now fighting back, releasing poison as they died. "Heart rate 200 and climbing," Katie called out. "He's going into cardiac stress." Danny administered a stabilizing injection directly into Shadow's chest. For one horrible moment, the monitors showed a flat line. The room went silent, except for the steady tone of the machine, indicating no heartbeat. Then, like a miracle, the line jumped. Once. Twice. A rhythm established itself, weak, but present. Shadow's breathing returned in great, shuddering gasps. "He's back," Danny breathed. "He's still with us." The first round of treatment had lasted only 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Shadow lay exhausted on the bed, his dark fur matted with sweat. But the monitors showed something remarkable. The parasite count in his bloodstream had dropped by 8%. It was working. Over the next 4 days, they repeated the process. Each treatment session was a battle. Each time, Shadow's body fought through waves of pain and toxic shock. Each time, Danny and his team pulled him back from the edge of death, and each time, a few more parasites died. Katie stayed by Shadow's side during the nights. She talked to him constantly, her soft voice filling the quiet room. She told him about the mountains of Colorado where she had grown up, about the family dog she had loved as a child, about her dreams of traveling to distant stars. Shadow could not respond. But whenever Katie spoke, his breathing grew calmer. His 4 amber eyes would focus on her face with something that looked very much like trust. The Corvalli treated Vethrax as weapons, Katie said to Danny one evening. They bonded them to warriors, trained them to kill. But look at him. He responds to kindness. He understands gentleness. These creatures aren't just weapons, they're companions. Danny watched Shadow sleep, the great beast's chest rising and falling steadily. Maybe that's why the Corvalli couldn't cure the infection. They never thought about what their Vethrax actually needed. They only saw them as tools to be discarded when they broke. On the 5th day, High Custodian Vorath returned. He stood in the observation window outside the quarantine room, watching Shadow with an unreadable expression. Danny stood beside him, exhausted, but defiant. Your creature is still alive, Vorath observed. His name is Shadow, Danny replied. And yes, he's alive. More than alive, he's improving. Parasite count is down 40% since we started treatment. Vorath was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was colder than before. This changes nothing. Even if you reduce the parasites, you cannot eliminate them completely. The survivors will multiply again, the creature will suffer, and it will die. You have only extended its pain. We don't know that, Danny said. Each day, we learn more. Each treatment gets better. We're making progress. Progress toward what? Vorath demanded. Toward keeping alive a creature that should be dead? Toward interfering with matters that do not concern you? He turned to face Danny directly. You humans are strange. You arrive in our galaxy and immediately assume that your way is better, that your medicine, your compassion, your stubbornness can succeed where ancient civilizations have failed. It is not confidence. It is blindness. Danny met his gaze without flinching. Maybe you're right. Maybe we are blind. But where I come from, we have a saying. It's not over until it's over. Shadow is still breathing. His heart is still beating. As long as that's true, I will keep fighting for him, even if your fighting only brings more suffering. Even then, Danny said, because giving up is easy. Anyone can give up. What's hard is holding on when everyone tells you it's pointless. What's hard is believing there's hope when all the evidence says there isn't. That's what humans do, High Custodian. We hold on, we hope, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, we're rewarded for it. Vorath stared at him for a long moment. Something flickered in his cold blue eyes, perhaps confusion, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the faintest shadow of doubt. You have 2 more days, he said finally. When I return, if the creature is still suffering, I will end this. There will be no further extensions. He left without another word. Danny returned to the quarantine room. Shadow was awake, his 4 amber eyes watching the doorway. When he saw Danny, a low rumble emerged from his chest, not a growl of warning, but something softer, something almost like a greeting. Katie smiled. He's been waiting for you. Every time you leave, he watches the door until you come back. Danny knelt beside Shadow and placed his hand on the creature's great head. The fur was warmer now, healthier. Beneath his fingers, he could feel the vibration of that strange, gentle rumble. 2 more days, Danny said quietly. We're not done yet, buddy. Not even close. Shadow closed his eyes and leaned into Danny's touch. In that moment, despite everything, the parasites, the deadline, the angry Corvalli waiting to take him away, the great beast seemed almost peaceful. He was no longer fighting alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. 3 weeks had passed since Shadow first came aboard the Starling. The quarantine room had been transformed. What was once a sterile medical space now held a large cushioned bed, several blankets, and a collection of toys that Katie had bought from the station market. Shadow no longer lay motionless on the floor. He walked, he stretched. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he chased his own tail like a kitten. The change was remarkable. His black fur had regained its deep shine, and his 4 amber eyes glowed with intelligence and warmth. The open sores had healed completely, leaving only faint scars beneath his fur. His muscles, once wasted from illness, had begun to fill out again. He was beautiful, powerful, and graceful, and very much alive. The latest scans showed a parasite count of less than 2%. The remaining organisms were too weak to reproduce and were slowly dying on their own. Danny's treatment had not just worked, it had succeeded beyond anything he had dared to hope. "It's really over, isn't it?" Katie asked, looking at the results. "Almost," Danny replied. "Another week of maintenance medication. And he should be completely clear." "We did it, Katie. We actually did it. We actually did it. We did it, we did it. We actually did it." News of Shadow's recovery spread quickly through Waypoint 17. Traders and diplomats from dozens of species came to see the miracle for themselves, the Vethrak that had been saved from Shalkai rot, the creature that humans had refused to give up on. Some were amazed. Others were skeptical, claiming the Corvalli must have misdiagnosed the infection. A few were angry, insisting that humans had no right to interfere with alien traditions. But most were simply curious. They wanted to understand how these newcomers from Earth had accomplished the impossible. Greg spent hours explaining the treatment to alien medical researchers. The combination of modified antiparasitics and targeted radiation had created a new approach to fighting the Shalkai parasites. It was not a simple cure that could be applied easily, but it was a starting point. For the first time in 3,000 years, there was hope for Vethraks infected with the rot. Shadow, meanwhile, had become something of a celebrity aboard the Starling. He followed Danny everywhere, padding silently through the corridors on massive velvet paws. When Danny worked in the medical bay, Shadow lay beside his chair. When Danny ate in the mess hall, Shadow sat at his feet. When Danny slept, Shadow curled up outside his quarters, guarding the door. The bond between them was obvious to everyone who saw it. "I've never seen anything like it," Lisa remarked one afternoon, watching Shadow nuzzle against Danny's hand. "The Corvalli bond their Vethraks through years of training and ritual. You bonded with him through kindness." "He knows I saved him," Danny said. "He knows I didn't give up." It's more than gratitude," Lisa replied. "Look at how he watches you. He's chosen you, Danny. In his eyes, you're his person now." With Katie, Shadow was equally affectionate but in a different way. He was gentle with her, allowing her to groom his fur and scratch behind his ears. Sometimes, when Katie sat reading in the recreation room, Shadow would rest his massive head in her lap and purr a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the entire deck. Katie had discovered that Shadow loved to play. She had fashioned toys from scraps of fabric and old equipment parts, and Shadow would chase them with the enthusiasm of a kitten despite his enormous size. His favorite game involved a piece of rope that Katie would drag across the floor, while Shadow stalked it with exaggerated stealth before pouncing triumphantly. "The Corvalli used Vethraks as weapons of war," Katie said one evening. "They probably never played with them, never treated them as anything more than tools." "That's changing," Greg pointed out. "Ever since word got out about Shadow, some Corvalli have been asking questions. There's a scientist on the station, Taylor, I think her name is. She's been studying our treatment protocols. She says there are others in Corvalli society who want to reconsider how they treat their Vethraks." It was a small hope, but it was something. Then High Custodian Vorath returned. He came with 6 guards this time, not 4. He came with official documents bearing the seal of the Corvalli High Council. He came with a demand that could not be ignored. "The Vethrak is Corvalli property," Vorath announced, standing in Captain Brennan's ready room. "It was born on a Corvalli world, bred by Corvalli masters, and belongs to our people by ancient law. Its recovery changes nothing. We have come to take it home." Lisa studied the documents carefully. "These papers authorize you to claim any Corvalli property found in neutral territory. But Shadow isn't property. He's a living being who has formed a bond with a member of my crew. Vethraks are classified as animals under Corvalli law," Vorath replied. "They have no rights independent of their masters. The bond you speak of is meaningless." "It's not meaningless to Shadow," Danny said. Vorath turned to look at him with those cold blue eyes. You have done something remarkable, human. I admit this freely. You cured a disease that my people had accepted as incurable. You showed determination and skill. But this does not give you ownership of a Corvalli sacred beast. Shadow, as you call him, must return with us. And if he doesn't want to go? Danny asked. Vorath almost smiled. What he wants is irrelevant. He is an animal. Animals do not make choices. Danny stood up. Then let's ask him. They went to the recreation room where Shadow was resting. The great Vethrak raised his head when they entered, his 4 amber eyes moving from Danny to the Corvalli guards to Vorath himself. A low growl began to build in his throat. Easy, boy, Danny said softly. It's okay. Vorath gestured to his guards. 2 of them stepped forward, carrying restraint devices designed for Vethrak's collars with electronic controls that could deliver painful shocks if the creature disobeyed. Shadow rose to his full height. Standing upright, he was nearly as tall as the Corvalli guards. His growl deepened into something dangerous. His 4 eyes narrowed. Shadow, Vorath commanded in the traditional Corvalli tone used to control Vethraks. Submit. Vorath, Shadow did not submit. Instead, he moved. With surprising speed for his size, he positioned himself between Danny and the Corvalli guards. His body formed a protective barrier, his tail lashing back and forth. His teeth bared in clear warning. He was not growling at the guards. He was growling at anyone who might try to take him away from his human. This is what choice looks like, Danny said quietly. He's not property, High Custodian. He's not a weapon. He's a thinking, feeling being who has decided where he belongs. The guards hesitated, looking at Vorath for instructions. Vorath stared at Shadow for a long moment. Something complicated passed across his face: frustration, confusion, and perhaps the smallest crack in his certainty. This is not over, he said finally. The High Council will hear of this. There will be consequences. Let them come, Lisa replied. We'll be ready. Vorath turned and walked away, his guards following behind him. The tension in the room slowly dissolved. Shadow turned to Danny, his growl fading back into that gentle rumble. He pressed his great head against Danny's chest, and Danny wrapped his arms around him as best he could. Good boy, Danny whispered. Good boy. Shadow purred, the sound filling the room with warmth. He had made his choice, and nothing in the galaxy would change it. The summons came 3 days later. The Corvalli High Council had reviewed the situation and demanded a formal hearing. Representatives from both sides would present their cases, and the council would render a final judgment. The hearing would take place aboard Waypoint 17, in the Grand Assembly Chamber that served as neutral ground for galactic disputes. Danny stood in his quarters, adjusting the formal uniform that Captain Brennan had insisted he wear. In the corner, Shadow lay watching him with alert eyes. The Vethrak had refused to leave Danny's side since the confrontation with Vorath, sleeping outside his door every night and following him through every corridor. They're going to try to take you away, Danny said quietly, not sure if Shadow could understand the words but needing to say them anyway. The Corvalli think they own you. They think you're just an animal that doesn't know any better. Shadow rose and padded over to Danny. He pressed his great head against Danny's chest, that familiar rumbling purr vibrating through both of them. I won't let them, Danny promised. Whatever happens in that chamber, I won't let them take you. The assembly chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from dozens of species. Today, it was nearly full. Word had spread throughout the station about the hearing, and curious beings from across the galaxy had come to witness what promised to be a historic event. The Corvalli delegation sat on one side of the chamber, led by High Custodian Vorath. Behind him sat a dozen officials in ceremonial robes, their faces stern and disapproving. On the other side sat Captain Brennan, Danny, Katie, Greg, and Shadow himself. Shadow's presence caused a stir throughout the chamber. Many of those assembled had never seen a Vethrak up close. The great beast sat calmly beside Danny, his 4 amber eyes scanning the crowd without fear. The High Council consisted of 5 elder Corvalli, each representing a different aspect of their civilization: law, tradition, military, commerce, and science. The eldest among them, a female called High Speaker Noreth, called the hearing to order. "We are gathered to determine the rightful custody of the Vethrak known as Shadow," she announced. "High Custodian Vorath, present your case." Vorath stood, his tall form commanding attention. "The facts are simple. This Vethrak was bred on our world, trained by our methods, and belongs to our people. It was abandoned by its original master due to illness, a tragedy, but not a transfer of ownership. The humans who found it had no right to keep it. Their medical intervention, while impressive, does not grant them possession of Corvalli property." He turned to face the assembly. "For 3,000 years, Vethraks have been the sacred companions of our warriors. They are symbols of our heritage, our strength, our identity. Allowing aliens to claim one of our beasts would be an insult to everything we hold dear." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vorath's arguments were persuasive, rooted in tradition and law. High Speaker Noreth nodded. "And the human response?" Danny stood. His heart was pounding, but his voice remained steady. "High Speaker, members of the council, I won't argue about property laws or ancient traditions. I'm just a doctor, but I want to tell you a story." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When we found Shadow, he was dying. He had been thrown away like garbage, left alone in a cold metal box to suffer until his heart stopped beating. No one was coming to help him. No one even stayed with him to ease his passing. He was abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect him." Danny looked at Vorath. "You call Vethraks sacred. You say they're symbols of your heritage. But you throw them away when they become inconvenient. You kill them when they get sick instead of trying to save them. That's not sacred. That's not honorable. That's cruelty disguised as tradition." The chamber fell silent. "I spent weeks fighting for Shadow's life," Danny continued. "Not because I wanted to own him, but because he deserved a chance. Every living being deserves a chance. And when he recovered, something happened that I didn't expect. He chose me." He gestured to Shadow, who had risen to stand beside him. "Look at him. He's not restrained. He's not forced to be here. He could leave this chamber anytime he wanted, but he stays because he wants to. He follows me because he trusts me. He protects me because he loves me." Danny's voice grew stronger. "You can argue about property rights and ancient laws, but Shadow is not an object. He's a thinking, feeling being who has formed a bond with someone who showed him kindness instead of cruelty. That bond is real, whether your laws recognize it or not." A young Corvalli rose from the delegation. Taylor, the scientist that Greg had mentioned. She looked nervous but determined. "High Speaker, may I speak?" Noreth seemed surprised but nodded her permission. Taylor stepped forward. "I have studied the human treatment protocols. I have examined Shadow's medical records. What they accomplished was not just impressive, it was revolutionary. They found a weakness in the Shalkai parasites that we overlooked for 3,000 years. She looked at her fellow Corvalli. "We stopped trying to cure our Vethraks because we believed it was impossible. We accepted their deaths as inevitable. But these humans refused to accept it. They kept searching when we had given up. And they succeeded." Taylor turned to face the council directly. "But that's not what matters most. What matters is what I've observed since arriving here. Shadow doesn't just tolerate these humans, he loves them, he plays with them, he purrs when they touch him." Her voice trembled slightly. "I have worked with Vethraks my entire career. I have never seen one behave this way. Our warriors bond with their Vethraks through discipline and control. These humans bonded with Shadow through compassion and care." She took a deep breath. "Perhaps we have been wrong about Vethraks all along. Perhaps they are not just weapons to be used and discarded. Perhaps they are companions who deserve to choose their own bonds." The chamber erupted in noise, some shouting in agreement, others in outrage. Vorath's face had turned dark with anger. But the High Council remained silent, their expressions thoughtful. High Speaker Noreth raised her hand, and the chamber fell quiet. "We have heard compelling arguments from both sides," she said. "The law is clear. Vethraks are property of the Corvalli people. But the situation before us is unprecedented. A Vethrak has been saved from death by aliens and has formed a bond that appears genuine and mutual. She looked at Shadow, who met her gaze without fear. The Council recognizes that our understanding of Vethraks may be incomplete. We recognize that this human, Danny Cole, has demonstrated extraordinary compassion and skill. We recognize that Shadow has chosen his companion. Noreth stood. It is the judgment of this council that Shadow will remain with Danny Cole. Furthermore, we recognize Danny Cole as a legitimate Vethrak companion, the first non-Corvalli to hold this status in our history. Vorath started to protest, but Noreth silenced him with a look. This is not a defeat for our people, High Custodian. It is an opportunity to learn. The humans have shown us that there may be better ways to care for our sacred beasts. We would be foolish to ignore this lesson. The crowd burst into applause, not universal, but widespread. Danny felt his legs go weak with relief. Beside him, Shadow pressed close, that eternal rumble vibrating through his chest. Later, after the chamber had emptied and the formalities had concluded, Danny sat alone with Shadow in a quiet observation room. Through the window, stars sparkled against the endless black of space. "We did it, buddy," Danny said softly. "You're staying with me." Shadow lay with his head in Danny's lap, his 4 amber eyes half closed in contentment. The great beast who had been abandoned, who had been left to die alone, who had been declared beyond saving, was at peace. Danny scratched behind Shadow's ears, feeling the soft vibration of his purr. "I promised I wouldn't give up on you. I promised you wouldn't die alone." He looked out at the stars, thinking about all the creatures across the galaxy who were suffering right now, abandoned by those who should have protected them. "Maybe we can help some of them too," Danny said. "Maybe we can show everyone what happens when you refuse to give up." Shadow rumbled his agreement. In the vastness of space, among countless worlds and civilizations, a single human and his Vethrak had proven something important. They had proven that compassion was stronger than tradition, that hope was stronger than despair, that the bond between two beings who chose each other could overcome any obstacle. Danny Cole smiled and continued to pet his faithful companion. This was just the beginning.